Hey, what's up? Welcome to another episode of What's Up Conversations. How you doing with this crazy coronavirus? Man, I've been trapped in the house for almost 3 weeks now. It sucks, man. It sucks. But during the time, I've had some awesome conversation with some great game developers around the world, and week by week, I'm going to release them. So make sure to follow, subscribe, whatever you do to help this podcast. And instead of going out, stay home and listen to What's Up Conversations, bringing you the truth, no matter how bad it hurts. Fallout fans will get this one. Anyways, in this episode, I had a chat with the legendary Alex Hutchinson, game designer of Sims, Spore, director of Assassin's Creed 3, Far Cry 4, and his latest masterpiece, the Typhoon's studio game, Journey to the Savage Planet. Alright, we talked about Sims, Spore, working with Will Wright, crazy stuff like God, Existence, and of course the memorable Royal Opera House of AC3, and directing one of the best Far Cry games, Far Cry 4, and of course his new game, and being bought by Google. Crazy, right? So it was a fun conversation. Let's go and listen to it.
Let's go.
Awesome. Welcome, Alex, to the new episode of What's Up Conversations. So good to have you here, and it's always a pleasure to talk to people with a legendary career like you, sir.
Thank you. No, it's lovely to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So, how's life after Journey to the Savage Planet? Is that what you hoped for?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's pretty early days, but sales seem to be going well. People seem to be enjoying it, so that's always the biggest plus. And we're still hard at work on DLC. We've got a new DLC coming out in a couple of weeks. So yeah, there's still a bit more Journey to the Savage Planet content to go before we figure out what's next for the studio.
Fantastic game. I love it. We'll come back to it later. So, where did you grow up, Alex? And with what games did you grow up?
I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and I was a big fan of the Amiga 500. That was the computer that I was using basically, from the time I was very small. So it was games like Cannon Fodder, Chaos Engine, Sensible Soccer, WizKid, all that sort of good stuff back on that Sim City, all kinds of good stuff. I had a Nintendo before that and a ColecoVision, but it was really the Amiga that was the system I loved.
So, when did you decide to get into video game industry? And tell me about your first experiences working on games.
I started out at a small studio in Melbourne called Taurus Games, where we were making mostly handheld stuff. So early on, I made a lot of Game Boy games, sort of Minority Report, Invincible Iron Man, Duke Nukem Advance, Pitfall, The Lost Expedition. So a lot of Game Boy games early on before I ended up getting a gig in California for Maxis and moving down there for Sim stuff and eventually Spore.
Nice. So you were the designer of those games, Sims 2 and Spore, and two of the best video games in history. So how was the experience working on such different projects?
I mean, that was pretty cool. I mean, the biggest thing for me at Maxis was, it was an amazing opportunity, and they were filled with such a deep level of talent that it was as much a learning curve for me as, trying to add value. And we were, tackling new problems in a weird space, more toys than games in a lot of ways. But it was amazing. It was a huge learning curve.
Awesome. So I'm curious about your experience with Will Wright. Do you remember the first time you met him? How was it?
He was great. I mean, Will's a certifiable genius. So he's a special guy. He's one of those people that throws out big ideas and is happy to challenge the team and ask questions that a lot of teams I don't think would be brave enough to tackle. So it was a lot of fun and occasionally quite scary, but in the end it was a good experience.
Are you still in touch?
No, he's off doing TV for a while, and now he's doing his other stuff. So no, he's doing his own thing down there with a stupid fun club.
So I'm going to ask you a question that you probably have asked yourself at least once in your life. Working on games like Spore and Sims, what are your views and opinion on our existence, reality, and God? And please take your time.
Well, I'm a pretty hardcore atheist, so I think we're stuck with the reality we're in, and and dealing with that is probably the wisest course of action. But no, they're big. They were amazing toy box experiences, and they were great at empowering the player and letting the player come up with their own solutions to problems. And I think that's a way forward for games. But obviously, there's lots of different angles you could take.
Good. So after Spore, you went to work in EA, and your first project was something completely different than your previous games, and it was, I guess, Army of Two: The 40th Day. Tell me about that project. How did you get involved in that, and what were your initial ideas making that game?
Well, the producer on that game was Reed Snyder, who's actually my business partner at Typhoon. We'd known each other for many years, and so it was an opportunity to work with him, and it was an opportunity for me to get back into console development, which I was really keen to do, and to get back to more sort of, I don't know, core games, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah.
It's been a long time learning, hopefully to be decent, making games that weren't really my cup of tea. So it was a cool opportunity to get back to something more my speed.
Right. So after Ian, you went to Ubisoft. Do you remember those days and your motivations for that decision?
Oh, well, that was it. I mean, when the opportunity came up to work on, a game like Assassins, that was super exciting. So that was probably the biggest motivation to get over there. And also, they had such a huge support network and such an amazing team that the opportunity to try and make something, at scale was also great. But, even that after a while working with, hundreds and hundreds of people can get tiring.
Yeah. So your first project there was Assassin's Creed 3, and one of my favorite video game series. How was it working on such a beloved project? And I guess you were the first guy who directed a major sequel to that franchise after Patrice Désilets, whom I had a chat before on this channel.
Yeah. That was it. And it was at that time when I joined, they were just working on Assassin's Brotherhood, which at the time was going to be a DLC. It grew into a full-fledged game soon after that, but it was originally pretty small. So it was early on in that franchise where they just finished AC2. It had been a huge success, and we were trying to figure out what was next. But realizing that the way to give hopefully some legs to the franchise was a new hero with each major installment, a completely new setting. I think that means it was kind of a new IP. In disguise, and that was incredibly exciting to have such a great engine, such a great team, such a great base to build on, but still have room to do something new.
Awesome. So, do you play Assassin's Creed games yet? And what are your favorite ones besides 3, of course?
No, I was a big fan of 2. I thought 2 was the pinnacle. I thought really probably 2 was probably the best. I haven't played many of the more recent ones. You get to a point where you play them so much in development that the idea of going back and revisiting them is not exactly the most exciting, but no, they've continued to grow it. I'm fascinated by the fact that they've sort of transitioned it from an action adventure game, which is what sort of 1, 2 to 3 were, over into sort of more of a action RPG. I think it'd be hard to find an example of a franchise that has transitioned genres and stayed successful. So I think that's a pretty great magic trick. But no, I need to get back and play the latest one, but with two small kids, it's hard to find the time.
Yeah. So one of my favorite moments of the entire franchise of AC was the beginning of AC3 in the Royal Opera House. A beautiful combination of music, storytelling, excitement, gameplay, and art. Do you remember making that?
Yes. I mean, we wanted it there like it was the best part of that, I think, was trying to, the head fake between Haytham and Connor as the hero. The idea that you were essentially playing a Templar at the start, I think, was a fun twist, and I think it resonated with a lot of people. But yeah, the Opera House as a little setting for a more controlled tutorial seems sort of great. But I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. So after Assassin's Creed, you directed another major IP for the Ubisoft, and that was Far Cry 4. Talk about that game, directing an FPS, I imagine, for the first time.
Yeah, we tried a few things back in the day, back when I was in Australia, but it was the first one that sort of saw the light of day. No, that was another great opportunity. I think, the thing that links the successful games I've worked on over the years is this, idea of player agency and player storytelling. So, the Far Cry as a franchise is a game that can, allow people to sort of mess around in this crazy playground with their own tools. And I think discovering that and exploring that was the best part.
So I imagine Far Cry 4 was the last game you played, right? In the series.
No. Of that series. So I played a bit of 5. My better half worked on 5, so I played quite a chunk of that. But no, I really liked the 5th one as well.
Awesome. So after Far Cry 4, there must have been a lot going on in your life. You left Ubisoft and you started your own company with your friends called Typhoon Studios. Talk about that transition.
It was an opportunity to go back to working with a small team. I think a lot of us are getting older, and we sort of pined for that, idea of focus, so that we could, all of us have a handle on the game we're making and not have, huge subcontracting teams and a big bureaucracy. So the idea of doing something, smaller and more controlled was really attractive to us. So we set up the studio, and then it was three years of hard work, but we finally got it out a few months ago.
Yeah. So what did you see in this game to make it as your first game for the new studio?
Well, I think it's always a process of figuring out the best combination of, a good idea, the reality of the people that you have, the time that you have, the budget that you have. So you're always trying to, find the best combination of those sort of elements. And for us, with the technology available with something like Unreal 4, plus the guys that we had, sort of making a really focused first-person exploration game seemed like something we could achieve. And thankfully, we were right.
Yeah, I gotta say, I didn't know anything about Journey to the Savage Planet before it was released, but then I saw a color for a screenshot, and that got my attention. And a little bit later, I was in love with that game. This game is pure fun, and while playing it, I was constantly imagining people at Typhoon with a big smile and happy faces making this game. It looked like everyone had fun making this game, right?
I think one of the best things about making games that are humorous is that it takes a lot more of a grind than you'd expect. Like telling a joke that comes off as off the cuff and lighthearted actually usually takes a lot of work. So it was a lot of work, but it was also fun. It was definitely fun.
It's so much fun. So what do you think of the main sources of inspiration for Journey to the Savage Planet?
There's a bunch. There's sort of like recent exploration games, whether coming from Far Cry or looking at sort of Breath of the Wild, sort of more open-ended, player-driven narratives. My love of sort of golden age science fiction played a big part too. Like the old idea of going out in search of adventure, because adventure itself is worth pursuing, not necessarily that you're escaping the end of the world or the coronavirus. And then the idea of sort of like player tools being a bigger, plus than any sort of scripted mechanic we could do, and all those sort of things together, sort of led to Journey.
So in 2019, Typhoon Studio was acquired by Google. How was the experience? It's such a great deal to be bought by Google, right?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, they approached us. We weren't looking to sell, to be honest, really, but they had an offer that was sort of too good to refuse, and it allowed us to keep the team together. And sort of, start making something new on, what is hopefully the future of gaming.
Awesome. So was it, they approached you before the Journey to the Savage Planet, before the release of that game?
Yeah, we'd been in conversation with them for a while. So, it's not something that happens in 5 minutes. So it was,
wow.
It was something we were definitely talking about for a while on the lead up.
Yeah. So, Alex, I'm a video game composer and sound designer, and I noticed that you have worked with some of my favorite film composers in your games. I'm gonna name some of them to refresh your memory, like Cliff Martinez, Tyler Bates, Lauren Balfe, and many more. Tell me about those experiences. How was working with a legend like Cliff Martinez, for example?
He was great. I mean, he's super talented. He's a very quiet man, so he's not a big
wow
big guy for conversation. So, but we'd seen work that he'd done, and it felt perfect for the game that we were making. So with all those guys, you're sort of trying to find someone who naturally fits the game that you want to build. You usually don't want to find someone and say, I know you do dance music, but we really need a big cinematic score. And you don't want to find someone the opposite. You want to find someone who fits the sort of shape of game you're trying to make, but can bring something extra to it. And so all of those they were all fun times. Getting Tyler Bates to do elevator music for Army of Two was particularly great. Like it has to be shit elevator music. And he's like, I think I can do it. So that was good.
So how about Lauren Balfe?
Yeah, he was great. I mean, he's exactly what we're talking in terms of like big cinematic score. His CV is endless. So it was a fit for Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. So for the Journey to the Savage Planet, you work with Brian D. Oliveira, who has done a fabulous job in this game, and I think the soundtrack album of the game is out right now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep,
so
it's free as well, so you can go grab it online anytime you want.
Yeah. Tell me about the process of making music for this game.
It was run by our very our little team here, but Brian is a multi instrumentalist, and he's a super talented guy. So we were able to get a lot of juice out of one person. He has his own studio here in Montreal. He's got hundreds and hundreds of instruments lying around. So once we said, it was sort of we wanted a sci-fi space cowboy sort of satire, and that was the tone of it. He was off to the races, and we built up a big reference library of sort of songs and stingers that were in the sort of wheelhouse of what we wanted, and he sort of then took it to another level.
Great work. So actually we're almost done, but before finishing, some quick questions. What was the last inspiring game you've played recently?
It was actually a game called The Outer Wilds, which was an indie game that popped out, and it was about a continual 20-minute cycles through a crazy science fiction landscape, and it sort of fit the aesthetic of what we were working on at the same time. I'm also playing a lot of Dead Cells at the moment. Dead Cells is fantastic. Yeah. As something to go home. I just bought a brand new big TV, so I've gone back into Gears of War 4. So now that I finally got a 4K TV, I'm re-enjoying a chainsawing to death in Gears.
Awesome. So what games you can't wait to play in the future?
What am I waiting for at the moment? I'm actually back into a board game kick a little bit with the guys here. So I'm waiting for a Kickstarter I back called Reichbusters to be shipped out. So that's something that I'm really, really waiting to play. And then in the game space, I'm looking for something, I don't know, still waiting for something radically new to come out. It seems like a while between brand new genres, so hopefully someone can surprise us.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Alex. Your amazing career has brought us fantastic experiences, and I can't wait to play the game your talented people at Typhoon Studios are working on right now.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. I appreciate the call.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time.